أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم
Hi.
There you are.
There we are. Can we invite you just? Can we have a shadow place? Sit there.
Okay.
Ich melde mich nie.
Okay. Alles klar.
Welcome in the circle and great to meet you. We talk in English? Yes?
Yeah, no
Yes.
problem.
Tony.
Tony is from Australia. Anyway.
All right.
We speak English too.
Yes, great. Simon, Chris, Philip,
Sylvia.
Yes. As you maybe came across, I try to inspire you to share your story and your profession around the word balance. So all these people here around this, on this world, as I call it, ball of balance, where we are all around, and we create fingerprints with what we do, and we create fingerprints on this ball to show we are here and we have something to share. And yeah, it's a pleasure to have you together in the circle to make your fingerprint and share your profession and your way of thinking about balance. Mm-hmm. And so what comes to your mind if you hear this word, Tony?
Balance. I guess the one that's most played is work-life balance. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not very good at that. A lot of my life involves work, but when I'm home, really try to spend time with children and family. But when you add it all up, I probably spend much more time on work than other things. Yeah. So what I do, I'm sort of have an ambassador. These days I have a more ambassadorial role. So I started off in the field in Niger Republic, West Africa, and I managed a small tree planting project. And particularly in harsher environments, it's very, very difficult. It's costly, it's slow, and it has a high failure rate. And what we developed was a method of natural regeneration. And from those days in Niger, where it spread to over 5 million hectares, much of it without my knowledge, and certainly without external assistance, after I left Niger, I joined World Vision. And for the next 15 years or so, I was managing projects around the world, promoting this approach to restoration. And then, particularly since about 2012, I've had more of an ambassadorial role, talking to donors, other non-government organizations, governments, policymakers, trying to create awareness and help them to see the applicability of this approach across very large landscapes around the world.
So you have a language to do that, because all these different stakeholders maybe don't speak the same language or have the same understanding of what is necessary. Is this a balance if you talk to so different parts of society or areas of awareness of what is happening in the world?
Well, I certainly tried to. My starting point is what's the interest of the person I'm talking to, and if I'm talking to the Minister for the Environment, it might be a slightly different conversation to the Minister for Development. So, yeah, that's the approach that I take, because it's no good going in with your own story and just hammering away at that. People have their field of vision, their interest areas, and I need to connect on that level. Yeah.
And how would you connect with people from Plan for the Planet, for example?
Yeah, so we have a lot in common. We both have a common purpose, and tree planting is very complementary to what I do in natural regeneration. And in fact, we do some tree planting where it's appropriate, particularly when people want fruiting trees and other special trees that won't come back through natural regeneration. So we actually have a lot in common.
And how does an implementation process function? Because as I learned, it is a real community-based approach.
Yes.
Which interferes with the school, with the local church, or what you want to call it, like different institutions on the ground.
Yeah.
How do they care, or how do they keep track somehow?
Yeah, this is a very good point, and it was a big learning lesson for me where I was approaching land degradation from a technical perspective and thought, if only I had the right species, if only I had the right methods, then I could restore this land. And when I realized actually in many, many landscapes around the world, the seeds are already there, the tree stumps are already there. The real problem is what people think and believe about the value of these trees. And so much of my work is not directly regreening landscapes. My work involves regreening mindscapes. And if I can convince people it's in their best interest and they can have a better future for themselves and their children by working with what nature provides, the rest is easy. Nature has an innate ability to self-heal if we take away the constraints. Burning, ploughing every square inch, cutting anything that grows up on its own, and overgrazing. If we modify or remove those constraints, nature will find a way to come back. So that's how I approach it. And yes, you're right. Community groups, school groups, women's groups, men, women, pastoralists, farmers, you have to engage everybody because it's their livelihood at stake. And if they don't believe in this, when your last dollar's spent, when you go away, those trees aren't going to last. It has to be owned by them in order for it to last.
What just came to my mind was even football teams, they can run around the fields, make their training and do the right cutting which is necessary. Like put it in your training for your balance, yeah?
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah? Like football or sports are so important in all over the world. So I think just to take up this picture with the football, that it's a training process, as you said.
And it is a team sport. If you have 3 team members going in a different direction, you're not going to win the game.
Yes.
And this is the problem with landscape restoration. Everybody is trying to make a living off this same piece of land. If we don't agree on and abide by the same set of working rules, it's not going to last. There's going to be conflict rather than peace and restoration.
Yeah. And is there a big difference between Asia and Russia? Or, I don't know.
Yeah. So the method that I teach, it'll look different in different contexts. So a highly mechanized Western setting, you're not going to want scattered trees across your paddock. That's not an issue when you only have a handheld hoe. So it'll look different, but the principles still apply. Working with nature, regenerating what wants to come up. Then there's cultural differences. So some regions have greater emphasis on getting ahead economically, leaving the countryside altogether, and their view of a better life is living in the city. Very hard to work with people who already have that mindset. So far, and most of our emphasis has been on African countries, so far it's been embraced and accepted mostly in Africa, but it's gaining ground in Asian countries too, India, Indonesia, Myanmar and other places. But the principles work across the board.
Maybe one thing to add on that, I think what Tony said was super important, which is the part that we also empower the minds, right? And that is so great about Plan for the Planet as well, because at Plan for the Planet we have trained over 90,000 young people to become climate justice ambassadors for Plan for the Planet, and I think it's super important to do these sorts of trainings to get new young people into our boat of climate justice, right, and of planting trees. And I think that is one super important aspect as well, that we have as Plan for the Planet, and you have as well, I guess.
The Plan for the Planet is a foundation which has roots 20 years, I don't know, 15 years. And as you said, you were working in a scale with World Vision, which is a much older, totally different setup of organization, way of institutional communication in all kinds of the field. Maybe you can give a short overview how World Vision is, why they are the key partner and why it makes sense.
World Vision is about 70 years old. They were founded in the US from a guy who was working as journalist in the Korean War. And a small child came to him, and he was left alone. He was brought to an orphanage, and they told him, we can't care about this young child, only if you give us some money. We are overcrowded now. So that's how sponsorship started. But today we are supporting whole regions. So means around 20 to 50,000 people in one region, and we are working in 100 countries together with the local communities. So means we are not sending people from outside. We are mainly working with the people in this region. And concerning FMNR, so the Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration, we are mainly working with farmers, and with those mainly with women, because we found out that women very much care about the future of their children. They are often very enthusiastic, and we just came back from Kenya, where there's a drought, horrible drought. Since 4 years it did not rain. And we saw a women's group doing FMNR, so trees coming out from the roots. It even worked there. So the old stumps are coming back even in harsh conditions. I also saw it in Somaliland. People said it did not rain for 3 years. People told us, you can have this piece of land, just do what you want. Everything is destroyed. But after 2 years, the trees were nearly 2 meters high. So FMNR works even in some deserts. They are head-to-head forest before. It doesn't work in the Sahara, where there were no forests anymore, but everywhere where there were forests, it works, even in Germany. I can also add, I saw a project in South Ethiopia in the region of Humbo. You can see from satellite there are some spots, green spots, around town Sodo. And so in the middle of Sodo you see a round spot, and in the south you see a green spot. There World Vision did some FMNR, and so 13 springs came back. The river has water the whole year now, and also there's a waterfall. So we could step out of this region, and people are now dreaming on bird watching and tourism. So it's a really effective method. Yeah.
So you come across many people who come across many wonders somehow.
Yes, there's hope. So that's the most important thing. We can give hope to the people, especially in the southern countries.
That nature defends itself. What is the?
Tony always says, if you work with nature,
miracles are possible. Yeah.
Miracles are possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think two of the biggest neglected resources. First of all, the people themselves that live in these countries that we're working in, they're considered illiterate, poor, risk-averse. Why listen to them? And so they're ignored, their opinions aren't valued, and people try to tell them what to do. And the second one is degraded land. It's written off as wasteland. In my dictionary, there's no such word as degraded land. This is only potential land. And if it was ever any good before, if it ever had forest or grasslands or was productive, then potentially it can be restored. And it can be done relatively quickly, at low cost, and we can do it at scale. What I mentioned before in Niger, 5 million hectares in 20 years, 200 million trees without planting a single one. And look at the context. We're on the edge of the Sahara Desert with a very harsh, unpredictable climate, one of the poorest countries in the world, and at that time there was no government support, and the NGO that I worked for was very small. Most of the work was done by the people themselves. And so I argue, if that's possible in that context, what about us? There's very few places that have a worse starting point. And so I challenge people, do you think you could do something similar to what the Nigerian people did?
Maybe now we are here with the big NGOs and we are here at the melting pot of bringing all this knowledge together and negotiating. And how do you organize on such an event? Like, how do you take the best out of it? To make your goal, to achieve your goal when you go.
It can be very confusing, but I guess in my context I have helped people like Sylvia and others within World Vision that have connections to ministers and ambassadors and so on, and I've actually been able to have some of those conversations. Otherwise, for example, tomorrow we're in a panel discussion with Forest Alliance, is it? Different NGOs working in this space. And so
maybe this could be also a good opportunity to
come and listen.
3 p.m.
Just here.
Osiris room.
Okay.
This one.
3 p.m. tomorrow.
So you can't reach everyone. There's apparently 45,000 people here, and there's so many conversations going on. But you try as best you can to be strategic, and you reach the ones that you can.
Yes. And what I don't know who described that to me. I think Eckhart was it. It was about the effect of having big trees inside of your agricultural environment, which strongly affects the whole
very much
way of agriculture and the biodiversity, whatever. So to plant the right trees, give them the time. It's in every agricultural way around the Nile. It would be a benefit probably,
Oh, definitely, and especially with climate change. So for every 1 degree increase in temperature above 35, most crop yields will decrease 10%. And we're heading for a 3, 4, 5 degree increase. So can you imagine, people are already hungry now. If you reduce...
you said 3, 4, 5 degrees.
Depending on the region and the model that is used, that's up to a 50% reduction. And so a light scattering of trees on a farm landscape can reduce air temperatures 10 degrees Celsius and soil surface temperatures by as much as 36 degrees Celsius. That's significant. Then in many regions you have hot desiccating winds. Having trees at the very least on the farm border against the prevailing winds can reduce evaporation, reduce the stress on the crops. A stressed crop is more susceptible to insect and disease attack. When drought comes, it'll be less equipped to survive the drought. Then what we discovered, or I should say scientists in Senegal found, many of the species that farmers were regenerating have this property of what's called hydraulic lift. They're drawing water from deep in the soil profile, and at night time the shallow roots leak some of that moisture into the shallow layer of soil within reach of whether it's a pasture or a crop. So it's effectively, the trees are effectively bio-irrigating the crop. And I think Sylvia mentioned we've got this 30-second video clip from Somaliland. Now, Somaliland's already a hyper-arid region, very, very dry. And on top of that, they've had 3 years of below average rainfall. The pastoralists there started FMNR 5 years ago, so the trees are maybe 2.5, 3 meters tall. And in their context, they chose to fence this, use wire fencing. Within the fence, despite a 3-year drought, the grass is green and it's standing a foot high underneath the trees. Immediately outside the fence, it looks like Sahara Desert. It's just dry sand.
Maybe you can show the film.
Yeah, I can show it. It's staggering. So I think the original question was, trees are important for agriculture. Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. And
what I love about tree planting, right, it touches on so many aspects. Not only can we empower young people, women, not only can we empower local people, but also we can tackle the crisis of biodiversity as well, what you said, right? We can tackle the crisis of food insecurity as well, because we improve agriculture, right? And also we tackle the climate crisis as well. So there are so many aspects. That's why I think it's so great to have that.
Let's see this film, which is probably, as you said, breathtaking, so one of the best.
so a little bit hard to catch the colour. But
wait.
You can see the green, and then over the fence it's just brown.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Wow.
So none of those were planted. It's all just farmers behaving differently. They agreed to take their livestock out and to only cut the grass with knives and to regenerate the trees. That's the only difference. And even out here in the desert, you can see the baby trees. All these were trees that were cut down, and it could look like this. But
for example, in these conditions, I think tree planting wouldn't work because the roots are too small when you plant them, and those roots from FMNR. They go very deep into the earth, so 60 meters and maybe even deeper, and they just catch the groundwater. So even if it doesn't rain for many years, like we saw in the north of Kenya or in Somaliland, trees also can grow because they just catch the groundwater.
Is there any initial act you do with the stump, or
it's more about stopping doing things like the burning, the trampling with livestock, the ploughing and the cutting. And this is why I said it's about behaviour change, mindset change. They're already growing. You see in the on the other side of the fence, they're there everywhere. They're already wanting to grow, but they're being suppressed. And I would encourage you, when you're on a tree planting field day, to observe what's happening. And I've seen it in many, many cases where before people plant the trees, they cut these weeds out, these tree weeds out, they cut them out and plant a baby one. And then you come back in a year, the little one's died, and the one they cut is trying to grow again because it has a deep root. So again, I want to emphasize, I'm not against tree planting. It's very important. It has its place. We do it in certain situations. But if you gave me a choice, because money is limited, no matter which organization you have, money's limited. Always observe what's nature telling you first. And it could be that you only have to fill in some gaps here and there with tree planting, but nature's able to do the bulk of the work if people's behavior changes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you said you didn't have information. I'll give you my card. There's website, there's videos, there's a manual. Yeah.
I think that's a super important point, and I think we should try to combine both
Yes,
of our strengths, right? So I think that's a good point, and I think we should collaborate, and maybe we can text you and also talk with Helge as well.
I think in Mali, when Tony is organizing sometimes
you.
so-called Beating Famine Conference, I think in Mali colleagues from Plan for the Planet were there as well.
Yes.
So it's absolute worthwhile to work together. Yeah, and we see farmers also when the forest is back, it's possible also to plant trees, for example, fruit trees like mango, avocados or whatever. So farmers do this. They start planting tea, but first the environment has to change. Yeah.
Maybe one last question. To achieve that transition, that on the local level and also on the state level, there's an understanding. You probably have to do different ways of lobbying, I would call it. Yeah. So as an NGO with based in different countries, you probably also tackled with injustices, or like I would like to go into the direction of, as an NGO, okay, you can focus on the trees and focus on that, but other topics pop in, and how do you deal with them? Or is it possible to deal with everything, or how do you keep focus on that? What a balancing act is that, somehow? Yeah.
So yes, it's not possible to do everything at once. And so we start with what we're good at and build on that. Just make a start, and with small successes, people are encouraged, and they'll be more willing to take the next step. And so one of the areas that we engage with governments is on advocating for enabling policies. In many countries, people do not own the trees on their private farmland, and communities do not own the trees on communal land. And so this is a great disincentive. Often powerful people, rich people might come in and take the trees. The village people who depend on that land have no say. So that's an injustice. And so we work with communities. Once they are convinced themselves of the value of the trees, then often they're emboldened. And we give them the skills they need to go and politely talk to the political leaders. And in the case of Kenya, for example, where from the top level, they have targets. One of them is 10% tree cover on all farmland. Another one is international targets. They've signed up to climate goals, to biodiversity goals. There's a scheme in Africa, AFR 100, to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land. But they don't have perhaps the money or the methods to achieve any of those goals. They're just not making it. And so this opens a door to us, and we come alongside them with the community. Can we help you achieve your internationally declared goals? I mean, we don't say this, but you're in a little bit of a fix here. You've made that declaration and you're not reaching it. But we're here to help you. Can we partner in this? And we invite them to come and see the work happening on the farmland, and the politicians are often blown away. They had no idea that illiterate poor farmers could do such good work. Once you have their confidence, then they'll start to work towards your favour. Where possible, changing those unfavourable policies. In some cases, we've seen where county level governments have even put budget towards these type of activities and built it into their annual work plans. So it's step by step, it's slow sometimes, but you have to start somewhere.
And this started when? When did you start?
Well, my journey with this started I moved to Niger Republic in 1980, it's telling my age, and the discovery of the underground forest was in 1983. So it's a long journey, but I'm very passionate to this day. I still travel around the world talking about this, teaching, following up, because it makes such an impact. In Niger, that 5 million hectares, people are growing in it. I think I told you, extra 500,000 tons of grain per year. and gross income across the 5 million hectares, $900 million every year, without government subsidies or non-government organisation support every year. So I'm very, very passionate, and it's been a long journey, but people are listening, politicians, other NGOs, communities themselves. Through World Vision, we've introduced it into 29 countries. Other organisations are embracing it and running with it, maybe even further than what I have. It's exciting. Yeah.
So when it's great looking back, huh? And forward.
It's great looking back, yeah.
To say it in a very positive way, I can say it, yeah?
Yeah.
So
yes,
it's a joy talking to you and see the joy in your eyes looking around.
Thank you.
What you have achieved. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. I guess that's the other aspect, and maybe you mentioned this. It restores hope.
Yes.
When you go into these communities, you're not just putting trees back on the land. Through doing that, people's hope is returned. And people with hope, they behave differently. They send their children to school. They improve their living standard. They invest in their agriculture. It changes everything. And it spills over because they've got hope. We've got hope. What's our excuse for not doing this? We've got to take it to people that don't know yet.
Yes, and I also think that the need for forests has brought so many ideas to different organizations, because I think a few days ago I met this person from an organization called Health and Harmony. So basically what they do is they go to these societies or these local communities that practice probably illegal logging or do some bad stuff to the forest, and then they try to provide basic amenities to them, like healthcare, food and stuff, so that they don't have to cut down the trees. Because the reason why they cut down these trees is because they want to use the benefits to have like a means of livelihood. It's not because it's not because they just want to cut down the trees, you know. So there are so many advantages in tree planting. Also environmental advantages, that it stops stuff like flooding, and it helps in soil, making the soil more fertile and stuff like that. So I agree with all of you, and I'm really, really happy that I'm here with all of you for this very, very wonderful conversation.
Yes. Great to be with you. Yeah. Was so interesting.